Hey everyone, I am so excited because I just bought a whole bunch of dahlia tubers. So I absolutely love growing dahlias in my container garden. My first year trying to grow them didn't go so well, but I've learned from my mistakes in the past and have had really great luck with dahlias for the last 3 years. They have a beautiful bloom and they're cut and come again, which means that I can cut the flowers, put them in bouquets, and then get continuous blooms. So I'm gonna go through and show you the tubers that I got. This is the most dahlias I've ever planned to grow in my garden. It seems like every year I keep adding more and more, even though the available space stays the same. But I'll go through the different tubers that I got. I'm also not gonna do anything with them today, but I am gonna go through my growing process. That way, if you're in a little bit of a warmer climate than I am, you can kind of start going through this now, and I'll go through from kind of beginning of the season to end of the season. And luckily, I've already filmed videos from previous years on these specific steps. So I'll link all of that below just in case you do want to get started before I do. Now, obviously, when I do plant my dahlias this year and all the tasks I do throughout the garden season, I will have videos for those as well. But if you want to get started now, all of the past year's videos will be down in the description box. So let's go through the dahlia varieties that I bought. So I've always got my dahlias from Gethsemane Garden Center here in Chicago. Gethsemane is my favorite garden center just because it's the first place I ever got houseplants and it kind of kicked off my whole plant addiction. So there is a special place for it in my heart. Also, and this is true of most garden centers, the staff is so incredibly helpful. If I need anything specific, any questions, I think I mentioned, but I brought in the photo of my dying bird of paradise to them to get some recommendations for. So the staff is great. So I love going there. I probably go there every 2 to 3 weeks during the growing season. But one thing I always look out for is when they get their dahlia tubers in, and they are currently in the store. I think I went the day that they actually put them all out. So you can see how crazy I am about dahlia tubers. So let's go through the ones that I got. Oh, I will also mention that this has happened a couple times, and I feel like it generally happens with a lot of places that sell dahlias where the varieties I got aren't what actually grows. That's happened to me, I think, twice out of maybe 10 dahlia tubers that I purchased. I think it does happen more at like garden centers, big box stores versus if you're buying from someone local. So if you've bought from a place where you've always received the proper dahlia tubers, let me know because I might check those out as well. So the first one that I got is Lilac Thyme. This is a dinner plate dahlia. For my dinner plate dahlias, those usually get to about 4 feet in my garden. I absolutely love them. They bloom like crazy. I did get this last year, but it became a red variety. So it was not the one that I bought. So I'm hoping that this one is correct. Now for me, because I'm just kind of growing as many colors as possible, it's not really a huge disappointment. I mean, I'm a little disappointed, but it's not a huge issue when I don't get the one that I bought. However, if you are like designing with a certain color scheme and you're assuming that what you put there is going to turn out as it looks, then you might be a bit more disappointed, so do keep that in mind. But Lilac Thyme is the first one. Oh, and all of these come with 2 tubers in it to plant. Next up is kind of one of my go-to tried and true is Penhill Watermelon. So this one, I think, I'm like 90% sure, I have to double check. I do have 2 pots of this overwintering in the garage, and I'll talk a little bit more about overwintering when I go through how I care for my dahlia tubers. And I love it so much that I got another one. So there's also 2 tubers in this one. This one is again a dinner plate dahlia. I tend to favor dinner plate dahlias just in my garden because I do grow them individually in grow bags. I like my plants to be a little bit taller, the flowers to be a little bit larger. If I was more like mixing it into a garden bed, I'd probably want some smaller varieties, which I do have one of, but in general, I just absolutely love dinner plate dahlias. Next up is Otto's Thrill. This has probably been my favorite that I've grown so far. Now, it could just be that the tubers that I originally planted 2 years ago just happen to be great at flowering, but these have flowered more than any other dinner plate dahlia I've had in my garden. Again, could just be a one-off, but I wanted to get some more. So These I originally planted in 2022. I overwintered them in the garage. I grew them in 2023 last year, but then it seemed like they got some sort of fungal issue. I can't remember, was it like mosaic? Maybe it was a mosaic virus. I don't know. It got something. And if I have a diseased dahlia, for me, it's not worth overwintering it. I would rather just get more tubers. So that's what I did. I no longer have one of these from past years, so I'm going to plant these two for this year. Next up is another one of my favorites. These are the Thomas A. Edison dahlias. They are a very beautiful purple reddish color, also dinner plate dahlias. All the ones I've shown so far are the dinner plate dahlias. So I absolutely love these. I love the color. I can't remember, so I have grown these before. I can't remember if they didn't come back in the spring, but I know that these are not currently being overwintered in my garage, so I definitely wanted to get some more. So that's 4 bags so far, 2 each, so that's 8 dahlias. Then the last dinner plate dahlia I have is Fairway Spur. This is completely new to me. It's like an orangish peachy color. I tend to find, now I love all colors in my garden, but I do find that I tend towards a combination of pink, purple, and orange. That's just been how it has been the last couple of years. I don't know if that'll change over time or not, but that's what I am drawn to. So I'm really excited for this variety. New to me this year, so I cannot wait to see how this does. And then again, fingers crossed that this is actually the one that's in this package. And last is a decorative dahlia. So these tend to be a little bit smaller flowers, slightly smaller plants compared to dinner plate dahlias. And this variety is called Caprose Pizzazz. I think that's how you pronounce it, but I think it looks more red on the camera, but it is more of like a magenta-y fuchsia color on the package. So I'm excited about this one. This, I think I'm gonna try to tuck into a raised bed with other flowers versus growing alone in its own grow bag, but we'll kind of see what happens once I start actually planting these. So those are the varieties I'm growing this year. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times 2 is 12. And then assuming that the 4 I have in pots in the garage come back in the spring, then I will have 16. And I know to some people that seems like a very small number. But when I'm working with limited space on my decks, to me, I'm already like, where am I going to fit all of these? But I think I know where they're going. I will take you outside in a little bit and show you my ideas for where I'm going to plant them. But right now, let me talk to you about how I plant my dahlias. So when I have new tubers in the spring, I like to plant my dahlias in their containers that they're gonna grow in early April. Now, if I was going to, in my zone 6A garden, plant them outside, I would want to wait until after last frost. So that would be about mid-May. I like to plant them inside, and I do this for a couple reasons. One is to see if they sprout, because sometimes you can plant a dahlia, if it doesn't have eyes, it might not sprout. I'll show you how to find out that when I actually plant my dahlias, but sometimes they just don't come up, and that's happened to me a couple times. That way I know ahead of time that maybe I need to replace it with something else in the garden. Another reason I do it is to give my dahlias a head start. So these will bloom through pretty late into fall until the frost kills them, and they'll produce blooms throughout that time. If I didn't pre-sprout them, they would probably not start blooming until like late July, but when I give them about a month ahead of time inside, I can have blooms in early July. So that's why I start them inside ahead of time. I will say, if you just did dahlias for the first time last year, for almost everyone I talked to, there seemed to be some sort of delay with dahlias growing and flowering. I don't know what it was with the weather, but this was kind of across different growing zones, both in ground and containers. People just saw a delay with dahlias last year. So if you tried them for the first time last year, didn't love them, give it another try this year. So after I get mine all potted up in grow bags, I will stick them somewhere out of the way inside until they sprout. That can take like 2 to 3 weeks, I'd say. Once I see the sprout, then I have to move them either in front of a window or underneath a grow light. And that can sometimes take up a lot of space, but I still think it is worth it just to give them that head start. Then once we're past last frost, which fingers crossed comes a bit earlier this year with the abnormally warm weather we've been having, then they get moved outside. Now, sometimes if it's warm enough during the day, I'll move them outside during the day to get sunshine, move them back inside at night. That's the great part about growing in containers that you can pick up and move, is that you can shift plants in and out depending on the weather. And then eventually they're outside throughout the entire season. They grow, they bloom, they're great. Again, I do have videos showing these steps, so I'll link those all down below. So then the end of the season, again, through the season, I will be fertilizing a little bit. I don't fertilize these quite as much as I do like my regular flowering annuals, maybe like every 3 weeks, because they are being grown in pots, but they can handle lower quality soil and less fertilizer than your annuals can. So I'll be cutting the blooms. The blooms look great in vases. They don't last quite as long as something like zinnias, but I still like them for just even a few days in the vase because they are so pretty. And then at the end of the season, what I do is I wait until the stalks turn black. So the cold weather will make that happen. It'll turn all the stalks black. Then I go through, I cut the stalks off, and that's when I move my dahlia bags, the grow bag that they're growing in, into the garage. So let's talk a little bit about storage. Again, video will be linked down below. But what a lot of people do, if they're not growing in containers, is if you don't live in a climate where it's warm enough for them to stay covered underground, then they dig them up, store them in vermiculite or something else, and you want to store them somewhere where it stays about 40 to 50 degrees during the winter. So in Chicago, I can't leave them outside, definitely not in a container, which cools down a lot faster than the ground does. So for us, the garage is really the only place that works for me. We do have a heated garage, so it doesn't keep it warm, but once it hits 40, the heater kicks on. So our temperature, and I do have a little thermometer in there, our temperature stays usually between like 40 to 45 degrees. Again, with the abnormally warm weather, there's been a lot more 50-degree days in the garage, but typically it's somewhere in the 40-degree range, and that, luckily, is perfect for dahlias. I don't water them at all. I feel like the soil keeps them really well insulated. The time when I did try to dig them up and store them in vermiculite, I forgot about them and they dried out. So you don't want them to stay like too wet, so I wouldn't be watering them over winter, but you also don't want them to dry out and get all shriveled up. So it's kind of trying to find that balance. And again, for me, what's worked the best is just keeping them in the garage. So what I do is, usually in the past, I have brought the pots up in early April that are in the garage the same time that I plant my new dahlia tubers into their containers. And then I wait for all of them to sprout. But I figured this time, because I'm growing so many more and don't have a lot of room up here, I'm just gonna leave them in the garage until they sprout, because they don't need light, they don't need water, I don't need to do anything to them until they actually start to break through the soil. So I'm just gonna wait for the garage to warm up naturally from the heat outside. And once I see that green growth coming back, which hopefully I do, because that means they are currently growing and will come back this season, then I will move them again up here somewhere underneath a grow light in front of a window. It gets really crowded in here when I have all the plants that have already started that can't be moved out yet, but it is totally worth it, in my opinion, just to get that head start. So that's kind of my process. Start them in containers in April, keep them inside until it's warm enough, kick them outside, wait till they turn black, cut them down, move the pots into the garage. I haven't divided any of the tubers yet. I'm playing around with potentially doing it this spring. The oldest dahlias I have, I just planted last year. So there is a potential that I could dig some up and divide them. But again, I don't know where I would put them. I could give them away. So I might do that just to see what they're like. But it's not something I do often, because again, I don't really have the space to keep duplicating my dahlias. And they don't all necessarily survive. So that's okay. And if you want to grow these as annuals, I think that's fine. Like, yes, technically they are perennials and can come back, but I know a lot of people who treat many perennials like annuals, and that's fine. So if that's what works best for you and you don't have the space to store them over winter, you'll have a really beautiful plant for 1 year. And I promise you will love it in your garden. So those are my growing tips. These are all of the dahlias that I'm gonna grow this year. I cannot wait. It'll probably be just a couple weeks until I start potting these up. And again, I will definitely have a video on that for you guys. So if you're in kind of my climate area, you can follow along with me. If you're a little bit warmer or colder, just either move it up or delay it by a few weeks. But I think that's gonna be everything for this video. Oh, no, it's not. because I want to take you outside and show you very quickly what I think my plans are going to be for these dahlias. Right, so my plan is to create a dahlia and zinnia border back along this wall behind my couches. So last year I did a border, but the plants are really short. And even though I loved how it looked, you didn't really see it. It kind of got lost. So I want taller plants back here. And I'll do a mix of those colors, the pinks, the purples, the oranges, and I think that'll look really nice. I also usually do, and I think I'm gonna do this again, dinner plate dahlia there and dinner plate dahlia right there. Okay, now that's gonna be everything for this video. So let me know any questions that you have down below, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.